All right, we should be streaming live now. I think that was the smoothest get off the ground of one of these. I've had, I think, every YouTube error that I've come across, but today this one's supposed to work okay. So really excited to be back on Tuesday night. Tonight we're doing our first double header, I guess, and having more than one speaker on tonight. So stick around. We're going to be going live from now until close to 10 o'clock. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. Helps more people find it. Also, if you can like the video, it's a huge help. The more likes and comments that are on the video, the more YouTube will send it out to other people, other coaches, other athletes, and the more people we can kind of get the information to. It helps us out a ton. So another housekeeping note, just thanks for everyone who's helped us get to 1,000 subscribers. We were pretty pumped about that on Friday. It was funny. Coach Scotto was our last Tuesday. He was our first guest and then our last guest before we got to 1,000 subscribers. So I was joking with him. I should have had him on again sooner. We could have got to that 1,000 a little bit faster, but really excited to talk about something that I think is certainly to our American audience is something that's commonplace and everyone, has a pretty good understanding of. But for our Canadian audience, I think it's something that coaches can take back to their programs. Like we talk about a lot of things, and there's a lot of great, coaches clinics and things on YouTube that coaches can use to help their athletes. And I think this conversation we're gonna have tonight about 7-on-7 football and its benefits and how it can help, development at any age, but certainly this summer in a non-contact world in high school could be a great tool for programs to understand and be able to use. So I reached out to Coach Edworthy, who I've coached with at Laurier for a long time, and has coached at almost like every level, high school, summer league, and now runs MVP Academy. Was one of the co-founders of that, to talk a little bit about 7-on-7. So, Coach, if you want to kind of let people know how you got to your coaching journey and how you got to coaching 7-on-7 with MVP, and then we'll dive into what we think 7-on-7 can do to help athletes in Canada and obviously across the world develop the game.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So my name's Coach Phil Edworthy. I've been coaching football for almost 20 years now, pretty much right when I graduated high school. I got asked by my old high school coach if I wanted to come and help out with the program. They wanted a couple extra coaches. So, 18, 19-year-old kid, just loved the sport and went to a university that didn't have football. So, I decided to come back and help out, and it kind of took off from there. So I started coaching high school football, and then one of the guys that I played with started coaching for the Cambridge Lions, and he messaged me and asked me if I would come help him. So got involved with the minor football there after 8 years, and then moved up to the university level 6 years ago, which is also the same year that we started MVP. Pretty much it started myself and my partner Sean. We were looking for kind of a different way that we could coach kids and develop kids that wasn't necessarily coaching at the tackle football level. So we noticed there wasn't really a lot of people running skills camps in Waterloo region. So we thought that was an area that maybe we could start. So we kind of figured out, okay, this is what we want to do. Talked to a couple of guys that I had coached previously that had moved on to the CFL and see if they would be interested in helping their time. And then there was a group in Mississauga called IDFFL that I'd kind of seen some stuff that they were doing with 7-on-7. Coach Younger and kind of just asked them kind of more what it was, and we ended up going and sitting down and having lunch, and they kind of explained what it was and what they were doing, and they wanted to start a league in the winter. So we decided that's something we wanted to add to our program. So we got a bunch of the high school kids in Waterloo region together for a tryout, and then that was kind of where 7-on-7 went for us. So we ended up with only 10 kids to start, and so we competed in the winter league. So every other week we would go down, we'd play some games and then do some skill work with the kids. And I could see the benefits and the kids getting better week after week. And then in the States, 7-on-7 for the last 12, 13 years has really grown into kind of the biggest thing going in the winter and spring. So we partnered with the IDFFL guys, and they took a couple of our guys to go compete in a tournament against U.S. teams. So I went to the tournament along with a few of our players, And that was kind of the point for me where I saw like, this is, a huge opportunity for our kids to compete against the best kids, but also, how beneficial it could be for them. So out of that, I just kind of decided, me and Sean just, said next year we're going to take our show on the road, and we're going to try and expand and travel to the States. And, since 2017, we've been taking teams to tournaments in the States. Obviously this year we didn't really get to do that, which was disappointing, but just to see the benefits of the players, and exposure to U.S. colleges, competition against players that are the 4 and 5 star kids that are going to Alabama and Georgia. If you line up against them and you can have some success, it gives you confidence that you can compete at a high level too. And when our kids come back and go to their high school teams, go to their club teams, they're better prepared for the next season. I think one of the biggest points for me too was, because there's no equipment, it's non-contact. From a safety perspective, the concussions kind of became a big issue when we were first starting. So, some parents may not want their kids to be involved with contact football at a younger age, where I think 7-on-7 has a big avenue to get kids into football right away and kind of use it as a development tool there. But the physical toll that it takes on the kids' bodies to play so many games of football, we just saw it as a different avenue for them to still compete and still get better and work on their skills, but not necessarily beating up their bodies constantly, especially after just finishing a high school season in November. And then if they're going to play summer football in the summer, we kind of wanted to bridge the gap a little bit. So it's been going ever since. And, we have kids now from Quebec all the way to Windsor and everywhere in between as part of our program. So, what we've been doing is kind of taken off, and we're just excited about, that mode of football.
Yeah, and I think I've been fortunate to coach some of the same kids that have been a part of your program, whether it's at Laurier or with the Cambridge Lions. We've had a lot of successful guys that have really benefited from that experience. So I haven't gotten to see it firsthand and been actually involved in it, or even I've never seen a 7-on-7 football game live myself. But I've certainly the testimonials from the players and the evidence that I've seen, right, just in players' growth from maybe as a sophomore to a senior. That 7-on-7 experience has been invaluable for them. And, even beyond, like, obviously there's the whole, I think for me, I think about it in two pieces. There's the whole like world of 7-on-7 in the States, which is huge in recruiting. And obviously as a Canadian player who might be playing high school in Canada, you trying to get to camps and get to 7-on-7 tournaments can be really beneficial in terms of, garnering attention, from American eyes, but even just as a pure development tool, like to me, you bring up the concussion thing. I think that's incredibly relevant. Just the pace of reps. One of the things I heard from a parent of one of the players who played with you for, I think, 1 year, was just, you go to these tournaments and the number of reps that you get, competitive, meaningful, strategic reps. It's not like camps are great too, but in camps, it's not like you learn a playbook and then you go apply the playbook and you're playing like 200 snaps or whatever. Right. Whereas in a 7-on-7 situation, like if you play 3 or 4 games, right, you might, end up playing a ton of snaps in one day. And to have that efficiency, right? Like football is such a practice-based game. Our practice to performance ratio is crazy. And so to be able to get that many meaningful reps without putting that wear and tear on your body, I think it makes it a really meaningful opportunity for whether it's Canadian high school or just, like programs like yourselves in more places. And I know that's certainly becoming much more common, in the last couple of years on this side of the border. So I think for coaches who are looking for something they can take to their program, to me, it checks off all the boxes, especially at the high school level, right? Because you're trying to minimize equipment, you're trying to maximize safety, trying to minimize the number of coaches you need, right? Like that's one of the challenges with coaching is, if you have 3 super dedicated coaches on a basketball team, you're the best coached basketball team in the region, right? But if you have 3 super dedicated football coaches, all those guys are working, 1,000 miles an hour just to try and get all the jobs done that you need on a football staff, right? So to be able to take that and break it into, 7-on-7 where the numbers are a little more manageable, and obviously without having linemen, there's just less positions to to coach and develop. So I think it's a super useful tool, and something that I think, and I think, obviously you believe in running the program, is going to continue to grow on this side of the border. If you were, and I mean, you've been in the situation, so you're in a good situation to get advice on it. If you were a high school coach watching this going, okay, I buy it, I like it, it's a chance for us to get more meaningful reps. How would you go about, if you're at a high school, like using 7-on-7, like as a development tool?
Well, I think the big thing is for the high schools, there's a couple, benefits of using it. Like you touched on, you don't need as many bodies. You don't need as many coaches. So you're there and you can essentially have one offensive coach and one defensive coach. And you can run through your whole playbook, right? I think most schools probably have some variation of pass skelly worked into their practice plan, which is essentially, you take out the lineman and you're not running it. It's only pass plays, which is essentially what 7-on-7 is. So it allows you to get a lot of reps for your quarterback and your receivers and really work on your timing from an offensive perspective. And not, you can focus strictly on your pass game, strictly on your quarterback's reads, and, building that kind of, connection with your receivers. And from a defensive perspective, you can't control what the other team on offense does. So, for example, if you're playing a team that runs the ball 80% of the time, your DBs are getting very little reps as far as their coverage skills. And it doesn't benefit them that much, where 7-on-7, where it's all passing, your DBs get a lot of coverage reps. You can, mix in zone coverage, man coverage, and really get them all of those, work the full toolbox that they need to, not just focusing on one aspect of the game. And like you touched on, you get a lot of reps. You run a play, you take the ball back. You run another play, you take the ball back. And, in the 7-on-7 game play, it's a 25-minute run clock. So that's how it's kind of structured when you go to these tournaments. So everything happens fast. Like the quarterback has 4 seconds to throw the ball or it's a sack, and then you lose it down and it's on to the next play. So like you touched on, we've been fortunate to have success at most of our tournaments, where sometimes on a weekend we're playing 8 or 9 games if we make it to the semifinals or the finals. So our kids are getting hundreds of quality reps. Like you said, the quarterbacks, it really works on their ability to read the defense and make decisions. And some people say it's not realistic because you don't have a pass rush, which is true. But at the same time, if the quarterbacks get to work on that and understand what they're seeing, in that format, they're going to be better when you get a pass rush in front of them, when you have the O-lineman in front of them, because they're so used to making that read already once they see what the defense is doing. I think especially for quarterbacks, it's probably the best way for them to develop from a younger age all the way up. Coaching, I've helped out with Pee Wee and Bantam before, and, it's easy at that age, if you have a stud running back, that you just literally run the ball every play and your quarterback doesn't get developed, your receivers don't get developed, your defensive backs don't get developed, because all they're doing is shedding blocks and making tackles. So incorporating, 7-on-7 from that age all the way through, there's benefits, kind of at every age group. And I think the biggest thing too from high school is, you can run that whenever you want. Like you can even just block it off in a half hour. You could go on the field at lunchtime with just your skill position guys and, for 20 minutes, get some extra practice in that you wouldn't get, and it doesn't take away from your initial practice time. And a lot of schools or teams are starting to do that more in the springtime, which I think is an ideal time where, you're not focused on game planning. You're not focused on, your league play and all of that. You're just focusing on development. So, once a week, twice a week, you can go out on the field for an hour with your guys and just run, 7-on-7, and you don't need, more than a couple coaches. So if you don't have a line coach, sorry for the linemen, but like the linemen don't need to go out there and do 7-on-7, but you can get all your skill guys. So I think it allows you to do a lot with a little. And I know, being a high school coach for the last 17 years, I've been at, teams, we've had a lot of coaches for every position. And, one year I was the head coach and I had 2 guys with me, and, we had to do everything essentially as a whole offensive unit, as a whole defensive unit, because we don't have bodies. So you don't get as much time to spend with your skill guys where, in 7-on-7, you can, just take one offensive coordinator, one defense coordinator, and, run as many plays as you want. And I think, one of the things that we've talked about, from a national level, like we formed a 7-on-7 Association of Canada, myself and some coaches on the West Coast. So there's Game Ready Elite in BC, and then there's Recruit Ready in Winnipeg, big time players in Calgary. Then there's Next Level in Nova Scotia, and we're up to 10 clubs from across the country. Is talking about how we can use the sport through 7-on-7, but also incorporate all levels. And one of the things that we kind of talked about doing, really providing a platform. High school teams run a tournament, and if your high school wanted to participate, you could sign up. If your club team wanted to participate, you could sign up. And so that's one of the ways that we're looking to kind of add that for people who are interested as well.
Yeah, I think it's the type of opportunity that if we're going to continue to improve the game, we need to improve how we develop players, right? Like that's ultimately, the game will only be as healthy as the next group of players that's going to play it at the highest level, right? And all the way down through. And I think it's a great tool to achieve that, right? And I think just thinking back like to myself as a high school athlete, even if you look at like Skelly, you talked about, there's no pass rush. Well, think how many things you do on a football field where it's not the exact game, right? Like no one would say, oh, and it's obvious, like no, university or Division I or whatever level of football it is, no coach worth his salt is going to watch like a drill and go, oh, I'm sure they can do that in a game, right? And I'm just going to totally disregard their 12-on-12 film or experience or whatever. But 90% or more of what we do in practice shouldn't be 12-on-12 full go to the ground football. Like if you're only going to, obviously you're going to evaluate the games, right? The kid can't play in the games, whatever. But to me, like as a development tool, you look at it and say, okay, it's like anything. It's like a drill progression. It's like half line. It's like inside run. It's like one-on-ones. But it's more on the side of, Skelly inside run, getting to team. So, when you talk about the ability to now double your reps in a season by saying, hey, we're going to have our skill position players do 7-on-7 at lunch on Wednesdays, right? Like, even if it's just that, and, like you said, you have 2 coaches that can make it out there. Or, for programs this summer, I think looking to have smaller cohorts because of rules around COVID, non-contact because of rules around COVID, and just trying to get more people back playing the game. I think it's something that I think we were kind of joking, like everyone jumps to flag football. And the club I'm involved with, like technically it will be wearing flags, but it'll be more of a like 7-on-7 Skelly type approach, right? So what are and I know you've got some clips kind of queued up for us. What are kind of the differences between just going out and playing like gym class football or like traditional Skelly and the actual like game of 7-on-7? Because I think that's the next question coaches are going to have. They buy into it. We're good. We want to do it. What do the coaches need to know to effectively run 7-on-7?
So basically, as far as gameplay goes, it's a condensed field. So it's a 40-yard field. So it's basically broken up into like 3 chunks from an offensive perspective. So you start with the ball, at the 40, and then you get 3 downs to get 15 yards, and then you get a first down. And then you get 3 downs for the next 15, and then 3 downs inside the 10 to score. So you don't need a lot of space too, which is the nice thing is, if you have a program that, if you're fortunate to have large numbers, you can actually get 2 games going simultaneously in the other directions on your field and run it properly. The way it's structured is, in American rules, there's 5 eligible receivers and then your quarterback. So it's technically 7-on-6 because you have 7 defenders, 5 receivers or running backs, tight ends, however you want to line it up in a quarterback. And the quarterback has 4 seconds to throw the ball. So most tournaments have a T. So basically the T is triggered with a timer that beeps after 4 seconds. So as soon as the ball gets picked up off the T, it counts 4 seconds. And if the quarterback hasn't released the ball, it's considered a sack loss of down. Some of them, if they don't have a T, then one of your offensive subs just takes a knee and snaps the ball to the quarterback. Or you can go at a shotgun or under center. So the quarterback can pick the ball up directly off the tee himself, or you can have someone snap it off the tee. So from an offensive perspective, if you want to work under center drops versus shotgun no drop, like you have the ability to do all of those things how you want it. So in a tournament, everything, the rules are kind of set, but if you're just doing it with your own individual program, you can kind of set it up however you want. And essentially you can use your whole playbook. And, one of the things that we talked about with the Canadian Association is, whether or not we adapt from American rules to Canadian rules. It's easily done where, you can just add the extra eligible receiver and add an extra defender. So you can have your 6 eligibles, you can have your 8 defenders like you would in a Skelly. Like it's not hard to do that. And you just use, whatever playbook you're using. And, the game just kind of progresses from there. It's a 25-minute game and the clock doesn't stop unless there's a serious injury. So everything happens quick and, it forces you to, as the quarterback, make quick decisions, read, react, and pushes the tempo for your offense if you want to. Obviously, if you're winning, you can slow down the tempo because there's a 20-second play clock. So essentially, when they spot the ball, you have 20 seconds from when they spot it to snap it for the next play. Because obviously, in a runtime game, if you're the defense and you want the ball back and the offense is taking like 45 seconds to snap the ball, they could essentially just run the clock out. So that's kind of the main rules. And then all the game rules are the same. Offsides is a 5-yard penalty for offense or defense. They call pass interference, holding. The rules of the game don't change. The only difference is you're not in pads and it's only, your offensive skill guys versus your defensive skill guys. And they have it set up, essentially most of the time there's 2 refs, 3 refs on the field. And, it at most tournaments, it's run pretty efficiently and you don't need a lot. Like really, you just need a football, right? And that's the good thing about it too, is you don't need equipment. So if you want to start up your own program or, right now in COVID where you can't have pads, well, you don't need it, right? So, from a cost standpoint for people who want to start up a club 7-on-7 team, you don't buy shoulder pads, you don't buy helmets, you don't have to buy any of that stuff. You literally just need a football. And, at your high school, if depending on what happens when you go back in the fall, if they're, hesitant to allow you to go in pads and contact, depending on the rules are, well, I don't think anyone would object to you doing 7-on-7 because there's no contact, there's no pads, there's no, hitting. So it should be, something that you can do. And like you said about, numbers, essentially you can have under 25 people and run a game, which I think is like the benchmark for having 25 people on the field in July. If you're looking at 5 offensive players and a quarterback and you have a couple subs, you can have, 8 or 9 guys aside and have 18 guys. So, it's something that I think is going to benefit you right now where there's very little that you can do. And then, use it as a tool however you want moving forward. But, all of the guys that we have in our program, they keep coming back because of, they see the value in it. Number one, we take them and they compete against better players. But, some of these guys, if you're a receiver and, your offensive system is heavy run, they don't get a lot of opportunities to run routes and catch balls. And, they don't get the chance to work on their skills. The quarterback, you don't get to go to many places where you're going to throw like 200 balls in a weekend and the only thing you're going to do is pass. So, there's no way you're not leaving a session without getting better because all you're doing is reading and throwing and running routes and covering. So, the benefits are endless, and it's probably the easiest thing you can set up because you don't even need flags, right? It's literally one hand touch is how the games are set up. So it's about the easiest thing you can do as far as football running any type of event.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's, again, like you brought up the value for high school teams. And I think with high school teams, it's always hard because it's all about investment and what you get, right? Like coaches already in high school are working crazy hard just to keep the machine running, right? And so they're, always looking for ways that they can do things more efficiently. And I think that even to the point where like, hey, if you did this in the spring, your players could run this in the summer. Like obviously your players can go throw a ball on a football field anytime, but if you've given them the structure, like, hey, this is how big the field is. These are the rules, right? These are the plays we want you to run. Here's the playbook. Like run these plays, and like not talking about in a COVID summer where everything's getting going for the first time, but just like sustainably, throughout, the next 10 years of improving the game. I think it's a no-brainer for high school teams that are trying to find an advantage and something that can help them continue to develop the pass game. And I think that that's huge. One thing I was just thinking about in my own head is, so what are the field dimensions if you play like the American rules? I'm putting you on the spot here. It's a tough one, but
yeah. So basically, like the easiest way to envision it based on the Canadian field is from one sideline to the numbers on the other side. So you basically, from the numbers to the opposite sideline is kind of like the out of bounds line is the easiest way to kind of envision how big the field is. And then again, it's a 40-yard length and they only have 10-yard end zones. So if you have a field that has lines, like if you're fortunate to have a turf field, what we do when we practice is we basically have our gameplay field start at the 50, and then the goal line is the 10-yard line, and the back of the end zone is the actual goal line on the field. So you don't run into the goal post, and then we block off the numbers to the other sideline with cones so they can kind of see how it is. But if you decide you just want to adapt it to the Canadian rules, because obviously when you're playing high school, if you're a high school coach and you want to think about doing it and you're not going to go play in the States, you can just add your extra receiver and DB and just use the full field, which is something that, it's kind of up to you how you would want to do it. Like we are going to, we are trying to host a tournament in May, and we did have some high school teams that signed up and wanted to be a part of it, which, our association, because all of our teams that are in the association travel to the States, we are using the American size field. So we will shrink it down and have, kind of the one less player. And then the other big thing too, is with American rules, like from an offensive perspective, you don't get, the waggle down to the line of scrimmage from your receivers. Like everyone has to be stationary, when the ball snapped. And then also from a defensive perspective, you don't have to be a yard off the ball. You can literally be right there for press coverage. But when you're doing your own thing, you can kind of decide what you want to do with it. We always do American rules only because we want to get our guys accustomed to when we go to the tournaments and we actually travel. And one of the things that some tournaments in the States, they actually do allow you to run the football. So you can line up with a running back in the backfield, and your quarterback can work an RPO. You can hand the ball off to him. You can fake the ball, and then you can pass it. So they all kind of have different rules that allow you to do different things. So from that perspective, it does kind of add an extra element that you can work with your offense. If you have that in your system where you like to run, the RPOs or run read option, and have your quarterback. The quarterback can't run, but you can hand the ball off to a running back. And, those are things that you can kind of adjust to whatever your offensive system is or whatever you want. Some tournaments, the defense, you're allowed 1 or 2 blitzes a game. So essentially you can rush the quarterback and, touch him for a sack instead of having to cover for 4 seconds, which, is pretty tough to do. If you're a defensive coach, you can probably, vouch for that. It's, watching your guys try and cover someone for 4 seconds with no pass rush is pretty tough. Yeah. So all of those things you can kind of work in the wrinkles of what you want to do. Most of the rules in the tournaments are mostly the same, but it's those little variations that are, kind of different. So if you want to try doing the American rules, basically from the numbers to the sideline is out of bounds. So you can just, line up cones where the numbers are and then block that off, and then only 10-yard end zones. Or you can just go full Canadian rules. And
yeah, we actually last summer in Cambridge, because we had our JVs and our senior guys together, the skill guys. We shrunk the field. We did some full field skelly, and then we did some where we played with the same number of players, but on a slightly smaller field because we had some like JV quarterbacks. And it actually, without the O line, like obviously the spacing is a little bit different and everything, but it was an effective way too, just to let more people have the arm strength to make throws, right? Like we all know that field corner can be pretty quiet, and having that smaller field, again, it's a development tool, right? It doesn't need to be the exact same as the Canadian game. I think there's even something to be said for, hey, if you're looking to just learn the playbook, maybe take the waggle out of it, right? Teach the waggle after. It's important, obviously. But if you're just looking to learn the playbook, taking the waggle out of it's one less thing that everyone's got to do right. You know what I mean? Especially with younger athletes. So, do you want to pull up those couple clips and we can show coaches a little bit? Obviously no fresh film, unfortunately. Maybe when we do the refresher on this next year, we'll have some good MVP tape to go over. But
yeah,
here, I think I got to help you share your screen there.
I have an option to share it, so I think I'm good.
There you go.
But just to preface, this is from a highlight clip that we made from it was actually the first tournament that we ever went to with our team way back when we first started. Unfortunately, the camcorder that I used to film all of our games that had the memory card with all the stuff on it actually got stolen from a tournament. And then my old computer crashed and all of the stuff was saved on there, so I don't really have much. But I have it paused right now. That's just kind of to show you how the offense and defense sets up. It's not really much different at all from regular 12-on-12 football from the skill position perspective. The only difference is there's no linemen. And then I'll just, play some clips, and then, if I see something, I'll pause it and kind of explain if there's something that's going on. But this will kind of give you, an idea of what the gameplay for the 7-on-7 game looks like. So this was our team back in 2017 playing a tournament in Michigan.
And if anyone has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'm watching the chat here.
Is it up there?
Yeah, yes. We got to there. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Oops.
Yeah, you're good. It's
yeah, I'm trying to pull it up to the full screen.
Yeah, it's all good. We did get one question so far here. And just more so about when you've gone down, like what's your experience been like against the American teams? And I guess maybe how is that like now, obviously with you having players from a variety of places, I'm aware of the success you've had just because we've worked together, but what's that like for a lot of the Canadian players when they go play American teams in 7-on-7, and how's that, how much has that changed since you first got started? We got full screen now, it looks like.
All right. Yeah, it's just it's loading. My internet is for some reason being crappy, and I made sure no one's streaming anything else when I came on here. But to answer that question while this kind of boots up, we've had a lot of success actually. Like we our first year we were kind of figuring out what to expect and what to find, but we went to 3 tournaments and we made it to the final 4 of 2 of the 3 tournaments. And then since then, we've won over 80% of our games. We've went to the championship game twice. We've went to 5 semifinals and the final 4s. We've had some success, and I think, it's kind of a combination schematics of what we run offensively and defensively, and just preparing our kids properly and making adjustments. And the thing that the Americans don't want to hear is that there's not really a huge difference in the talent level of the kids that we have in Canada versus the States. It's just the big thing with the Canadians is most of them don't have the exposure, which is why we run our program the way we do, so they can get seen by recruiters and compete against better players and then kind of see where they stand. So we were fortunate that, we've had a lot of success. Right before COVID hit, we actually flew to Los Angeles, and we had a, let's say a unfortunate ending, but we were undefeated in the tournament, and we were playing the number 3 ranked team in the whole country. And, we were losing 14-12, and we had the ball at the 15-yard line, and the ref stopped the game 5 minutes early. So, we were there against, one of the top teams in the country. And, ultimately we ended up losing 14-12 without getting to finish the game. But, to go up there and go 5-0 heading into that game, it was a good accomplishment, because, you always, if you follow U.S. high school football, you probably know who St. John Bosco is. You probably know who Mater D is. And, we played against teams with the kids on their teams, and we beat, the teams that had those kids on their teams that had the 3-star, 4-star, 5-star ranking. So we can compete. It's just, finding the opportunities. And our biggest challenge is because geographically we are so spread out. We don't practice as much as we would like, just because I don't want to put the onus on parents from Windsor to drive 3.5 hours every week to come practice with us for, a 2-hour practice. So, we spread it out. So originally, when we started with only kids in kind of Waterloo region, we would practice more, but as we expanded, it's not realistic. So actually COVID, the only blessing it gave us was, the idea to run Zoom meetings where we can do a lot of our installs and teaching points virtually, and then get on the field, as much as we can too. So, it's given us that. Let's see if I can play this. Maybe if I turn my camera off for right now and then I just play the video, I think that.
I mean, the other thing is, I'm sure, like you said, there's a ton of 7-on-7 highlights on YouTube, and so if coaches are looking for a visual, it's I'm sure it's easily found on YouTube as well. The other thing that I think is super beneficial, and you talked about getting lots of reps at these tournaments, is the ability to go play both ways. Like if you're running this for a high school program, right? So like if you're playing, like in the spring, you talked about using it as a development side. If you have like junior football, what a great way. Like you have some juniors coming up, you're not sure, maybe they're a junior running back, but you think they're going to play corner, or maybe they were the JV quarterback, but they're going to move to receiver or whatever. What a great way to get a ton of reps, and put yourself in a situation where you're a JV kid coming up, you're trying to learn the playbook, learn the system, and as a coaching staff, you're looking at that situation going, okay, we have this whole new crop of kids that are coming up from our JV program. We don't know if they're going to play offense or defense, especially in high school. Like how many times do you get a guy that plays one position in JV and goes on to be, a 2 or 3 year senior all-star at the other side of the ball? I think it can be an incredible tool that way, because just the number of reps that you can get in that situation.
Well, to your point, we actually do that with our guys too, especially like this year we decided to expand and have, basically a JV team. Like we added a 15U team, was essentially, grade 8s, grade 9s, and grade 10 age, like 15 and under. And, we kept the roster small, and so we could work guys in both positions and kind of let them kind of develop and see ultimately where they would project from a university recruiting perspective. And, one of the things that's big, like we're heavily involved with, NCAA recruiting, and we would be at camps if we were able to. But the number of receivers at camps versus the number of DBs at camp is typically 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 to 1. So I always tell our guys, if there's so many wide receivers out there, but if you're 6 foot, 6'1", there's far fewer corners that are over 6 feet tall that can play the position well. So, you should learn both and kind of see how it goes. And, I think for kids that's starting out, like you're talking about for junior football, and even, like Pee Wee Bantam age kids, when you're 10, 11, 12 years old, you don't know what your body's going to look like when you're 16, 17, 18 years old. So the nice thing about 7-on-7 is, even if you're the bigger kid that everyone puts on the line and you never get to do anything fun, and maybe you'll quit football when you're 12, like I was a chubby kid and I was in that spot, like, in 7-on-7 with no linemen, you get to run routes, you get to cover, you get to try and be a quarterback. And I think, from the younger ages, starting with that model and giving everyone the opportunity to, learn the game and have fun, with the game that way, and play multiple positions and figure things out is, a good tool. And I think, there's a reason why the United States, it's such a big platform for development, and it's obviously working for them because, typically the consensus is they're the best, of the best players play in the States, which, obviously we're starting to prove more and more and more with the kids in Canada that we're just as good. But, it comes down to development, exposure, and a few things where, their kids, once their high school season's done, they go to the weight room, they train, they do 7-on-7, they play basketball, track, whatever else they do. But, the number of reps they get from, even if they just play in 3 7-on-7 tournaments between January and May, adding 3, 4, 500 more reps before you go back to your training camp is, makes all the difference. And a lot of the kids that are the best kids on the best 7-on-7 teams, coincidentally, they're the ones who are getting a lot of, the NCAA offers, because when they go to the college camps, they've already had so many reps in a one-on-one situation as a receiver. Like, you've gotten so many reps that you're ready to go and compete, and DBs, quarterbacks, so I think there's definitely room for the growth here in Canada. And that's, why myself and Keon and Brad and Jordan, the 4 guys that started the 7-on-7 association, like we all traveled to the States. I met Keon, who played in the CFL, was a 2-time Grey Cup winner, 2-time West Division All-Star for the Stampeders. And he's from Tennessee. And, the idea of playing, so much tackle football was kind of, it was odd to him when he settled in Canada. So they were kind of used to the 7-on-7. I met him in California at that tournament I was talking about. And so we were talking about, it's great to come to these events, but like the amount of money that we spend and going, like we could, start to grow this at home and start to build the platform for it here, which is, kind of where we're headed in 2022 with it. And, we're trying to help as many people that want to get started, or, provide the information for anyone who wants it. So, you can use this model to better develop your own players, no matter what level you're coaching. There's a reason why the CFL started a U Sports 7-on-7 passing showcase to evaluate, skill players for all the universities, right? And, all the NCAA schools hold 7-on-7 camps. So all the 7-on-7 teams can go and get evaluated. And I think, maybe down the road, it might be more, start to take off a bit more in Canada, where the universities will start to look more at that as well, as an avenue to recruit and, for development too.
Yeah, and we didn't touch on this when we were kind of talking before, but I'd be interested to hear, your perspective. And I know you're so involved in it that it's probably its own episode. But I'm sure there's a lot of, it's become so much more popular in the last, like I remember when I was coming out of high school about the same time Tyler Varga was, and playing in Guelph, right? And knowing him, ironically as a Cambridge Lion where I now coach. He was like the only guy that I was aware of that like had a shot to go D1, obviously for great reasons, an incredible person, incredible athlete, it's the exact type of guy that should go and have a great D1 career and ultimately play on in the NFL. But, if you had told me when I was in high school, hey, 10, 12 years from now, you're going to see 20 Canadian kids get offers in a day. You know what I mean? Like it would have been unheard of. Right. And especially, many of them from Canadian school, like even some from Canadian schools. Right. I think that it speaks, obviously, like you said, and it's something that we all know coaching on this side of the border. There's great players but the development model obviously is behind what they have in the United States, and obviously there's so much more money involved in the United States. It makes sense that all the infrastructure is there, right? Being a high school football coach is can be a lucrative career, right? Never mind being a college positional coach, right?
Yeah.
Like what me and you do at the college level in Canada, right? There's guys who are putting,
Yeah.
that's their lifelong bread winning job, right? And so it's obvious, like it's kind of like hockey here, right? The supports are there for hockey here because there's the financial incentive and the history behind that being an avenue to get to the highest level of the sport. So if you were, and there's some, athletes that watch our stuff as well. Some we're trying to do a little more of is get more out there for athletes. What would be your advice if you're like a grade 9 Canadian high school football player and you think, hey, I have realistic expectations. I'm not stepping on the football field for the first time, and I'm the third string running back, but I want to go play D1, right? Like obviously playing D1 is a big deal. Playing U Sports is a big deal. Getting recruited period to the next level is a big deal. But for athletes that are serious about that goal, of playing, whether it's U Sports or NCAA football, what would kind of be your advice to those athletes, kind of like grade 9 through grade 12?
Well, the big thing is the earlier you start, the better when you're looking at the NCAA, because the biggest difference is academic requirements. So in Canada, when you're applying to university, they take your, top 6 grade 12 university level marks. But the NCAA, they're basing your 16 core courses from grade 9 all the way to grade 12. So your academics, you need to focus right away, because what you do in grade 9 matters when you're graduating in grade 12, which, isn't necessarily the case in Canada. So that's, one of the big things is understanding that the education and how you become eligible academically goes from grade 9 to grade 12. Your core courses being, your English, your math, your science, social sciences like history, geography, and then you can take, French, Spanish, foreign languages. But knowing those requirements is a big thing. And then you need to have highlight film. So whatever you can get, that's how you're being evaluated on. So, if you're not on a team where they film your games, get, somebody to film your games so you can make a highlight film of your play so that coaches can evaluate you. Because, it's hard for any coach to really seriously consider looking at you if they've never seen you play. Obviously, it's tough right now for us in Canada with COVID. So, if you're a grade 9, it's not so much a big deal. But, in place of that, doing agility drills, workout drills and training drills is stuff that kind of supplemented that now. And then the big thing is, your social media is very, very important. So you need a Twitter account if you want to get recruited, because all of the college coaches are on Twitter, and that's NCAA and U Sports. That's the biggest recruiting platform out there, and it's the easiest way to find coaches, because you follow them. If they follow you back, you send them messages, but you need to be on there so that you can connect with them. From the NCAA, they can't directly contact you until September 1st of your junior year, which is your grade 11 year. So if you message them, they can't message you back, but they can read your messages, and they can watch your film and stuff. But it's important that you need to be able to contact coaches, and they need to be able to contact you. And then making sure that you're somebody that your coaches will value and recommend. One of the things that our program has done since we've started was really build good relationships with a bunch of college coaches from all levels, Power 5 all the way to junior college in the States, and then obviously all of the U Sports schools in Canada. And if you have a coach that people trust that recommends you, that's going to help with your recruiting. And if they see your film and they're interested in you, and they message, your high school coach, your 7-on-7 coach, your club football coach, whoever it may be that coach you, if they won't recommend you, you're not going to get recruited. So you need to have the character and be the type of person that, people want to recommend. And if D1 is your goal, understand that there's very limited opportunities for each school to offer scholarships. So you have to be exceptional, especially being from Canada, in all areas. You need to have grades. You need to have the talent. Typically, you need to have the physical traits, the height, weight, that they're looking for. But you need to be, somebody that because they're going to talk to your high school coach. Sometimes they'll even talk to the school's janitor or cafeteria lady, because if you're, the big cheese on the football team, everyone in the school is going to know who you are. And I've actually, had coaches tell me of stories where they've, not offered kids because they got, a bad report from the hall monitor, or, someone who says, yeah, they're disrespectful. Like, everything matters. So you're pretty much under a radar for everything you do. And it's even more so at the D1 level, because they're investing so much money in your scholarship, and there's so few, opportunities. Just so, you're aware, typically there's a maximum of 25 scholarships per year. And that's a maximum depending on what the school has for FBS. And FCS has smaller numbers. So 85 total for FBS, 63 for FCS schools. So if you're thinking, there's over 1 million kids that they could potentially recruit for these positions, you need to check all the boxes. So you need to really, you need to have the work ethic in the classroom, in the weight room, on the football field, be a good person, and be able to be seen. And definitely getting with people that can help you develop, whether it's a strength and conditioning trainer, whether it's a 7-on-7 club like, us, or, if you're out in Alberta or BC, you can look up any of the clubs that are out there and get their help. And then, you need to be with people that know, how to kind of get you where you want to go. For us, we've been fortunate that, in our 4.5 years or so, we've had 14 guys that got NCAA scholarships, and, we're closing in on 40 guys that are playing in youth sports. So, we have kind of built the platform for us to help kids getting recruited, whether it's through our own contacts, going to the tournaments, going to camps. So you need to be able to be seen. And I would, say, especially for Canadians, unless you're a 5-star recruit that, everybody in the country is offering, the only way you're really going to secure the opportunities is by going to the college camps. And, Jackson talked about, 20 kids getting offers, in a day or two. And it's actually happening for Canadian kids that were fortunate enough to go down to the States and go to some camps and are getting, significant offers. There's a D lineman that, just was there for a week, and he got a dozen D1 offers in a week of moving to the States, just, by his performance at camps and, being with the right people. So if that's your goal, that's where you need to be, going to the college camps. If you're unfamiliar with it right now, for the whole month of June is like a buffet. Like, college coaches are traveling all over the country. There's camps, in every state, all schools, all levels, and, going to places where you have a legitimate shot of being recruited, based on, your size, athletic ability, academics. There's a lot of schools that you have to have a higher grade point average than the bare minimum to get an NCAA scholarship. So figuring out where those are and finding, those opportunities is the best way. And I guess the biggest thing above all else is, believe in yourself, because if you don't have the confidence and you don't believe that you're going to make it, and you're not fully invested in it, then, it won't happen for you. And, we've had athletes that, have been a part of our program that, have had the potential to go, to the highest levels, and, their work ethic and their grades and just, their character and personality wasn't at the same level as their talent. And ultimately that can affect you in a negative way. That's why I said, you have to kind of be the best in all areas. And, if you ever want advice, like if you follow our Twitter at MVPFA 2016, we do a lot of Q&As for recruiting, and, we have a lot of college coaches that follow us or that we talk to. So if you ever want any recruiting information, you can send us a message on there, and, we're happy to help as many kids as we can. And, we charge. Oh, last piece of advice, don't pay for a recruiting service.
There you go.
It doesn't cost
I'm
money.
glad that one came up, because I think one of the things, and there's so many businesses around the sport, right? And I get that everyone is trying to make money, and I understand that, and people need to make money, right? Like, I'd rather people be in a job where they're trying to help kids than just some other job. That's great. But I think kids can't, I had no intention of going to the NCAA, because I knew I wasn't going to be the athlete. I could check all the boxes. The athlete box was not going to get checked. So I was just really fortunate to get a great opportunity here at U Sport level. But, kids, I think, are always, like, every human being in the world is looking for an easier way, right? Like that, there's so many things to do, right? It's so hard. We all want to make things happen. And, there's so many different ways you can spend your money. And I think when you talk about, like, the camps and being a part of programs that are going to help develop you, like, the football side is most important, right? People can say, oh, if you don't get the exposure, you'll never make it. Well, like, that's true. But if LeBron James was born in Winnipeg, he would have made it to the NBA. You know what I mean? Like, the elite player, especially now, right? And maybe, 30 years ago, that might not have been as true just from a pure exposure standpoint. But, like, everyone walks around with a camera in their pocket better than the one we filmed CFL games with, like, 15 years ago, right? So, don't if you're a high school athlete, I think the biggest thing you can take from what Phil's saying is it's possible. It takes a tremendous amount of work and sacrifice from you, and you got to pursue the right opportunities, and just doing the hard work, right? Like, it's a business, and those teams are in the business of winning games, and you have to understand the level of competition, even to get to the U Sport level. I think a lot of times people, like, I'll be talking to a high school athlete, and they'll be like, oh yeah, like, I want to go D1, and I'm like, look, dude, like, with all due respect, you haven't made the decisions to put yourself in that situation. So why don't we just try and, like, let's see what we can do in this next year to change that. But, like, you've got to have the right mindset and understand, hey, this is a job interview from the minute you get into grade 9 through hopefully to when you sign the paper. And that's just to get your ticket in the door. And then after that, that's a whole other show in itself. Just to give one funny story here. And I've told Coach Falls this story before, but I went to the same high school as Coach Michael Falls, who's the head coach of Laurier, and was my boss for 6 years. And, obviously Canadian football fans are pretty familiar. Great coaching career already. But obviously had a very successful career as a quarterback, and he played Division I football and played in some prep schools. And so he was at Ross in grade 10, and my phys ed teacher was telling a story to this kin class that he got a call one day from a recruiter. He couldn't remember what the school was. Said, hey, I want to come meet Mike Falls. Like, when can I come to your school? So he comes to the school, sits down in the phys ed office, talks to the phys ed department, talks to the principal, talks to one of his other teachers. And then it comes time for him to go meet Mike, and he says to Mr. Evans, who's still the head of phys ed at John F. Ross, and Mr. Evans was, what, don't you want to go meet Mike? Like, you've talked to everybody else. He goes, oh, no, I'm not allowed to talk to him for another year. I just wanted to check in and see if he was legit. But can you show me him in his English class? I want to make sure he's 6 feet tall. And then walked out and left the school. So I'm not sure where the guy came from. I'm sure it's, somewhere in the northern part of the country. Somebody came all the way across the border just to make sure Coach Falls is 6 feet tall, and that, none of the janitors at the school had anything bad to say about him. So it's an incredible opportunity, wherever you get to play, post-secondary athletics and football, certainly. But if you're looking to, improve your game as a coach, 7-on-7, something you should be looking at. And as a player, if you have any questions, I know Coach Edworthy really well. We worked together for 6 years at Laurier. You can hit him up with any questions. So I'm going to let Mike Daly get in here and get started on his thing. But Phil, thanks for joining us, and super beneficial to talk tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. See you.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach.
No problem.
All right, we're going to be joined. This is our first time we've done this where we've had 2 guests. So we're joined now live. Thanks, Mike, for joining us. I haven't done the switch over between guests before, so usually I have some time to prep the next speaker. But we're trying to do 2 of these a night now to get a little more in as we get closer to hopefully football coming back at every level. Obviously, your level at the CFL level might be the first one to get back to meaningful football here on this side of the border. But really excited to be joined by Mike Daly. I'm going to let you introduce yourself so I don't miss anything in the resume. But a guy that I followed, I think your training account actually a few months ago, and just, you know, I've really enjoyed the content and reached out if you'd be willing to come talk to us a little bit about, you know, defensive back and even linebacker development, and kind of skill training, which is what you do when you're not playing the game at the CFL level. So if you want to just kind of let people know who you are and how you got to you know, playing football in the CFL and now, you know, helping mentor the next generation, and we'll kind of get into to athlete development after that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. First of all, it's, you know, hopefully football does get back soon, because I'm sure we're all missing it, and
Absolutely.
you guys are doing a good job at getting everybody, you know, that little bit of taste of football that they have. So I'm always happy to do stuff like this. A little bit about me, just really quick. Started playing football probably grade 10. From there, went to McMaster, played on the Vanier Cup winning team at Mac. Had a lot of fun with that. That's where I met a lot of coaches that kind of helped me out, make me, you know, have that step up to the CFL. And then I've been with Hamilton for I guess 8 years now, and been having an awesome time to be able to stay in the city of Hamilton from Mac, and then with the Ticats, it was a great time. So and now I'm here trying to get out of the COVID world and play some football. I'm sure we all miss it the same amount. So again, thanks for having me on, and that's a little bit about me. I don't want to get into too many details, but yeah, thanks.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's funny, like it feels like it's been so long. I was actually, because we're hopeful with my summer program to be getting back out on the field, and I think, you know, you're local, so I'm not even sure, you might even train some of our guys. I haven't even asked you that, but you know, it's interesting to see, like, as we get back to now, you know, and it's been so much on, I think, during quarantine, at least for a lot of coaches, has been about X's and O's, because we've just had more time to learn more stuff, right? There's been all these, like, especially, you know, in the States, there's been, you know, like, I've seen, hey, here's a Zoom link, we're talking football all day. You know, you get this kind of unprecedented access to coordinators who weren't even sure, you know, in the States, if they were going to be able to play in the fall. And, you know, as a coach myself, I spent so much time, people talk about scheme and learning more of the game, and the game's changing, and, you know, it's an arms race, and that's one side of it. But I think one of the things that it's also kind of brought to light is how can we prepare athletes to perform at the highest level, right? That's ultimately what coaching is. And especially in football, it's such a schematic game. You can kind of fall into the wormhole of, you know, the next best play, the next best coverage, the next, you know, best route concept. But, you know, I think that the teams that are successful and the athletes that are successful, it's all about how you're developing the individual player. And with COVID, we've had to just do that in different ways, right? Like, we couldn't line up last summer with our program and do inside run, but we still want to teach guys run fits. We couldn't, you know, have live plays with pads on, but we still want people to be able to learn and be able to perform when we get back to playing football. Now that we're, you know, hopefully close to playing tackle football again sometime in the near future, that's kind of where my mindset's gone, is, okay, what can I get my players doing today so that they're ready to perform, you know, hopefully when we're on the field in September, or when they're on the field for their high school in September. So I guess first off, just in general, before we dive into specific, you know, you're obviously in a pro situation where you're preparing yourself to play, while also training other athletes. You know, what would be your advice to football players at any position right now who, you know, hopefully have been working out this whole time, but maybe they need to ramp it up now, getting into, you know, hopefully 4 months out, or maybe 6 months out, whatever it is, from getting back to competitive football reps?
Yeah, the biggest thing is just setting some sort of schedule. So at least, you know, picking a couple of days to get on the field, because I'm sure everybody's in the same situation as we were, where, you know, you kind of get into this groove of not playing part of your season, and that's a lot of your running, you know, in your entire year of working out, is playing in that season, playing in those games. And then once that season's done, you kind of take that break of running around, you know, the pressure on your joints, all that kind of stuff with the turf, the cleats. You take a little bit of break from that and get into lifting. Well, with what's been going on, is I think what's going to end up happening is a lot of people are going to be lifting a little bit more than they're running, right? And that's kind of a big issue, because you want to be able to mimic, like having a season. You know, we didn't have a season. Nobody did. So you want to be able to mimic with running that season so that you still get the wear on your joints, but you still get the, the conditioning in that you would have from football. So, I mean, now that the weather's nice, it's a little warmer outside. We have the winter to deal with here, which is different than some of our counterparts down the States, right? So it's a little tougher to run, especially when indoor places are closed down. So I think once it gets warmer out like it is now, you kind of have to switch your training mentality from, just hammering weights in the gym, lifting as much as you can to, okay, now I'm going to have to play sports on a field. You know what I mean? I'm going to have to go and now play football and run around. And, it's not about getting under a squat rack as much. It's about getting out on the field, doing cuts, getting your running in, because really that's where the injuries are going to be prevented, right? You're getting all this strength base, all this explosion base from the lifting. But if you don't translate it into being able to move on the field, I mean, once you start trying to play a tackle sport where you're hitting people and trying to go as fast as you can, that's kind of where the injuries happen. So I think the biggest thing is, once we get a little closer to being able to play, is to make sure you're on the field. At least for me, I'm trying to get out there 3-4 times a week while still lifting a little bit, just to make sure that my body is conditioned for, when training camp opens up, when the practices get a little bit harder, and then ultimately the games.
Yeah, it's such a, and the nice thing for me is like coaching high school athletes. A lot of the guys that I coach play another sport as well. So really a lot of these guys have missed like 2 seasons. Like a lot of my athletes, their conditioning schedule is, okay, I got my fall football season. And, I'm thinking of like a lot of the Jacob Hespeler guys, they got a great track program. They're running track or they're throwing in the field events, right? And that's 2, you think of the cumulative loss there of, reps in any sport, basketball, kids play hockey, rugby, whatever it is. We're looking at now like 3 seasons, really, last summer and then this whole high school season. And like you said, we don't have the fields are a little different. If you're training in Florida in December than what we got up here. So I think that's a huge concern. And one of the things that I've tried to express to some of our athletes who have reached out to me and said, hey, what should I be doing right now? So the first thing you got to do is make sure you don't get hurt when you go back. Like as much as it's a bummer that we've missed this year and a half, right? It's going to really be a shame if your hamstring blows out, on the 12th play of your first punt cover, right? Like that's a huge concern. So obviously I think that's a mentality thing. And, high school athletes who are learning, and this is where I think the value comes in, having more people, doing things like you do with your training platform, is more people get a chance to see, hey, like what can I do when I get out on the field? Because I think it's easy, you go to the gym and it's okay, I'm gonna bench, I'm gonna squat, maybe they even got more advice and they're doing some Olympic lifts, like that's all well and good. But what do you kind of do as an athlete when you actually get on the field? And that's one of the things I wanted to kind of touch on with you here today is, so if the athletes are saying, okay, great, I got to get on the field, I want to do something, particularly, through the lens of defensive players, but, whatever, drills you have, that whether it's like specific, like kind of defensive footwork, or it's just general, performance, that you want to show us. I guess that's the next thing I want to just touch on is, what can athletes do if they're going to get on the field 3 or 4 days a week? And what would kind of be the parameters for you around like priorities? Because I know I have a couple of players like, coach, like I've been out running like 5Ks. I'm like, that's awesome. That's better than sitting on your bed playing video games, eating chips. But that's also not sport specific, right? So you're going to want to take that effort you're putting into those 5Ks, right, and apply it maybe in a more sport specific context. So, and I know you were trying to get some videos from your phone onto your laptop. Do you have anything you want to show us at this point? Just kind of like your advice for some drills that could help players kind of functionally get ready for the season.
Yeah, I definitely got some stuff to show you guys in a little bit, but I did want to touch on what you said earlier is with your athletes, they're losing multiple seasons, and you started rhyming off, basketball, track, hockey, all these different sports. And, the biggest thing that I can say, at least for myself, that's provided longevity in my career is cross sport training. So my entire off season, I make sure I play as many different sports, mainly basketball. Basketball is a really big one for me. I didn't play it growing up, but it translates so well with football in terms of the quick movements, conditioning, short bursts of speed, you know what I mean? And really just try to play as many different sports as you can, because I feel like lately we get into this very sport specific training where it gets us ready for that sport individually. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't develop as an all around athlete. And I think what we are starting to see, and, with my teammates, you go through our locker room at the Ticats and you start talking about what people played, growing up, how much they played football, how much they played other sports. And I mean, we always joke right now is we could put, 4 or 5 different sports teams together and try to give pro teams a run for their money, right? Because a lot of us are multi-sport athletes, and that is what I think ultimately gets us to be that all-around athlete, which in turn helps us in football. So I think that's probably the biggest thing is, and I know it's a little tough right now with COVID, everything going on. You can't really go and get a pickup basketball game anywhere, but that's probably one of my main off-season goals is to try to play as many different sports as I can. And then ultimately, once you get into that sport-specific training, like we were talking about, it's just about, kind of tailoring it to game-specific playing. And I know we're going to talk about specifically on defense, DBs and LBs. The thing you'll see a lot is cone drills, right? People put out ladders, they'll put out cones, they'll be by themselves, and you'll see, a DB backpedal and break. And he knows exactly where he's going, he knows exactly where he's breaking, when he's going to break. That's all well and good for footwork speed, for, getting proper planting, but ultimately that's not how you're playing the game, right? At no point as a linebacker or a DB, as a defensive player, are you knowing exactly what you're doing, because we're always reacting off of something. So I think the biggest thing for off-season training is try to work in reaction type drills. And I'm going to share my screen if that's all right with you right now, and I'll try to get into some. That's
perfect. And I think your point about the playing multiple sports is huge. And obviously you want to play. I think Myles Garrett was in the news the other day or whatever. He's like dunking basketballs on Instagram all the time. And I think the Browns are a little stressed. But, as a high school athlete, I played multiple sports. I didn't play them all that well, but I enjoyed being on multiple teams. The other thing I think it does for people, and this is on a totally different topic, is I think I was a better football player because I was a bench player on the basketball team, right? So I was a starting left tackle in high school and had OUA aspirations and ultimately got, a chance to play in the OUA. I was a pretty good lineman, right? But it was good for me, to be totally humbled as a basketball player and understand the role of like a role player, right? And it was good for me to, I was actually a better rugby player than I was a high school football player. It was good for me to have those like different roles on a team, because you see the team dynamic totally differently, right? My experience as the 12th man on an offset basketball team, in grade 10, team that went on to play, on offset 3 times, like we had some great players. Right. I had a totally different look and I got to understand leadership from a totally different position. Right. I was the guy that everybody looked at, on our offensive line, right. Playing experience, whatever. But, on the basketball team, I was just the guy trying not to screw up the 1-2-2 press. You know what I mean?
Right.
Especially for high level athletes, it's almost great. Not that, you want to not be good at something, but it's great to have those different team structures. Football team is very different from a baseball team, very different from, a track athlete who's playing, an individual sport. I think it, and especially for athletes while they're in high school, like I just shake my head so much at guys who are playing, one sport and they feel the pressure to specialize because they want to be the best. And to me, it's like, look, you're robbing yourself of some of that experience. But B, like, look at all the best basketball players or best football players, hockey players. I think there was a good stat. It was something like 27 of the first round picks of the 25 were 3 sport athletes, and the other 5 were 2 sport athletes, right? So, and that's the NFL at the highest level. So, I don't think that's. I'll save that clip and play it for my guys, because I don't think that's something our high school students can hear enough. And obviously, right now it's a moot point because they've got no sports, and that sucks. But when we get back to it, I mean, you might be able to play basketball before you can play football. You might be able to run track, right, before you can play football. My advice then would just be don't hold out and wait. Go out there and experience as many different team environments and sports as you can, because your hard work's never wasted, right?
Yeah, and just to that point, like me personally, I think my entire high school career and a little bit before that was just jumping from one sport to the other, right? The one sport would end, football in the fall, it would end, and we'd have hockey tryouts the next week. You know what I mean? So we would be lifting a little bit in high school, but I know what's going on right now is if you're specializing in one sport, you're getting a lot of lifting in, which is good, but you got plenty of time to get strong, right? Plenty of time to get big, plenty of time to get strong, but you don't have a lot of time to keep playing all these different sports and getting, upgrading your athletic ability, which it will just carry over as you're playing all these different sports. So I think, most importantly is, cross sport training. And then secondly is, getting the gym and lifting weights. But if you had to be in an extreme one or the other, like you play sports and run on the field all day long, right? But yeah, so I'll get into a little bit. What I want to touch on is, what we did this off season is we had a few of either the CFL guys, a couple university guys, University of Waterloo Laurier guys, and we did some videos. And all I want to do is I want to show you the biggest thing that I think for specifically linebackers and DBs, just kind of their training mentality on reaction. Like I said, so cone drills are great, ladder drills are great. All that stuff is really good for conditioning, for getting your foot speed going, for stepping in the correct spot. And I'll show you a couple because I'm still doing that. But I think the most important thing and the thing that's going to help you the most is working on reaction, working on, whether it's, you get your mom or your dad out there to point like this, point like that, and that's how you're breaking, or you have a receiver out there or somebody else that's doing, breaks, so you can work on that. But I think the biggest thing is reaction based, because like I said, you want to make it as game specific as possible so that once that game happens, you're ready to go and you've already trained that, right? Because you can kind of cheat the drills where, I know I'm going to backpedal 4 steps and then break to this cone. You can kind of cheat those drills. So I'll share my screen so we can see some stuff.
Perfect.
And what I'm going to start with, so these are all the videos that I have over this break of COVID. I started taking videos while I started up this training. And so I'll start with just the reaction breaks right now, just the simple. Well, what I'll do is I'll do one cone drill so we can see what it looks like. And, what we want to focus on is clean footwork, stuff like this. The biggest thing when you're planning on starting, to hop out on a field and do some sort of breaks is to have a plan, to understand what you're working on. So I know as a DB, what I'll say is, okay, today what I'm going to work on is all of my press techniques. So I'm going to set up specific drills for press, right? I'm going to focus on reaction all out of press. I'm going to focus on my eyes because that's one of the most important things. But just to have a certain specific, goal that you're going to accomplish, because if you don't have that, you're kind of going to be all over the place, right? So what I'll start with here is just some simple cone stuff. They're like 6-second clips, so I'll probably have to run them back and forth. I don't have the cowboy in my hand, so we can't do the, the reverse play, reverse play, reverse play. But this first one that I'm doing it's a box drill. Okay, so this is me running through, and all this box drill is focusing on zone drops with my eyes back at the quarterback. So what you'll see in this drill is we have somebody standing, acting as the quarterback, just standing completely still. And all I'm going to do is open my hips and drive deep, come back downhill with an open hip break, and just keeping my eyes on this quarterback, okay? Eyes on the quarterback in the inside, break open. And then just at the end, we were doing different kind of breaks. This one is a zone turn, as you can see. So a zone turn being right at this point here. What I'm going to do is I'm keeping my eyes on this quarterback. Zone turn, keep your eyes on the quarterback as you're turning. Man turn, we're going to spin around. Speed turn, as some people call it, right? Keeping our eyes on the invisible man in this. But we're going to zone turn. And these are the biggest things. So, I don't finish the drill very well, right? Some might say a bad ball, but I'll say I don't finish the drill very well. But the biggest thing here is, and like anything in training, anything in football, your eyes are the most important, right? So what we can see is right here. As soon as I'm here, I want to be having my eyes focused on the quarterback in this situation, right? So here, break open. And again, whenever we're doing something where we know exactly where we're going every time, you have to focus on clean footwork. So I know once I hit this cone, I'm going to turn it open and look at the quarterback. So it's not about getting out of there or getting into there as fast as possible. It's about as little steps as possible and as clean as possible. So what I'm focused on is making as little amount of steps and planting with the correct foot, right? So usually your outside foot, and receivers really know this. If you're going to break to your left, you're going to plant hard with that right foot. If you're going to break to your right, you're going to plant hard with that left foot. This is the key thing. So in these type of drills, when you're doing the cone stuff on your own and it might only be you, make sure we're focused on clean footwork and being able to get in and out of those breaks in as little steps as possible, right? So one more time, right here, little steps, plant with the right foot, and then get out of there. And again, with those type of drills, it's good to do cone drills, like I said, getting your feet warmed up, but everything is generally reaction based. I didn't know if you want to ask any questions after that or anything that you can specifically talk about with your guys or not, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think the focus on, again, like I think for a lot of high school guys who might not have a ton of direction, they want to go and they want to work. I love the point about having a specific goal, right? So we're going to work on, it might be one skill in a variety of drills, or it might be 2 or 3 skills that link together that you use in one concept or whatever it is. But I think that's great. Like you talked about having a plan and scheduling out your week. I think, the next step to that is obviously scheduling out your workout and having a purpose helps you make decisions about, what you're ultimately going to do. And I think that's huge, especially for athletes that right now are trying to get some work out there by themselves. And I think your point about understanding the difference between like drilling a skill and then the next step on, okay, now we're going to use that skill and you're going to have to read something. You're going to have to read, like you said, mom or dad point left or right, or, quarterback opens up, or the receiver plants at this leg, so you're going to break this way. I think that's something that you only need 1 or 2 people to make it work, right? Like as long as you basically have a stimulus, right, you can operate that depending on your position, right? That stimulus might be a ball carrier, that stimulus might be the quarterback, that stimulus might be the receiver. Obviously on the other side of the ball, that stimulus might be, the leverage of the defender or whatever it is. But I think building that in so that you're not just, working on that kind of like rote skill over and over and over again of break on a 45, break on a 90, break on a 45, break on a 90. I think those are my big takeaways listening to it. And, it's something that can be easily forgotten, right? You're trying to work hard and you're focusing on how hard you work in the rep, not how efficient the rep is at like translating to the skill that you're trying to develop. So I think that's the big takeaway from that for me.
Yeah. And I know a lot of things right now is focusing on, the Instagram workouts, things that you're seeing, certain football players do, or there's certain trainers that are making their player go through, over 17 different hurdles and 14 different cones and doing all these different breaks. But the biggest thing is it's the keep it simple method, right? I won't continue the whole thing, but it's the keep it simple method. It's focus on, just to start, especially if you're by yourself, focus on, like you said, the 90 degrees, the 45 degrees, but just ramp that type of drill up. So whether it's, having somebody have a reaction, like you said, a stimulus, whether it's somebody pointing, as simple as somebody pointing, right? But what we also want to do is, if you don't have somebody, focus on those simple drills, because that's what's going to end up happening in the game a lot. But really focus in on exactly what you want to be doing. So what it kind of carries into these next videos is what I'm doing here, and I'll show you once I'm done talking about it, but I'm going to be working on my 90 direction drive. So my outs or ins as a DB, right? Or as a linebacker, it's the same thing. But all I decided to today was this was going to be off coverage. And what I was focusing on was I didn't want a ball. I just wanted to be able to drive as hard as I could. So where you lose a lot of the speed with a ball and stuff like that, because everyone wants to look back right away and catch a ball. The biggest thing is when if you're by yourself, you might not have a ball, right? So what we want to focus on is what you can control. So the biggest thing is, if I'm working on this 90 drive and I don't have anybody else with me, make it simple. We're breaking 45, we're breaking 90, we're breaking 180. But now I'm just going to focus on really getting out of my break, right? I don't have anything else. So now I'm going to just focus, get out of my break as fast as I can. So I'll pull this up. I have a 90 drive here. Again, it's going to happen fast. And so at the end here, what I'm focusing on is as soon as I decide where I'm breaking. Now here I have somebody reaction. So on the other side of this camera, there's somebody pointing. You can see my flip-flops that are out there as my cones. And all those are mimicking right now as my receiver because, you know, as a defensive back, as a linebacker, you always want to look where you're breaking first, right? Especially if it's some sort of manner you're breaking on a ball or on a throw, something like that. So I have these two flip-flops out here. I think one's a cleat, one's a flip-flop, but I have somebody pointing. And all I'm really focusing on is really driving and not looking back for the ball. I'm just trying to make up ground, trying to get as fast as I can in and out of this break. So to start again, what I decided here was I'm going to do 3 reps. I'm going to backpedal 1, and then I'm going to shuffle 1, and then I'm going to open hip. I don't have the open hip video, but I have the shuffle one here that I'm showing you. So I'm going to shuffle 1 out. So that's just instead of backpedal, some of you guys might have seen the shuffle. Linebackers use it, but they'll generally use it on 45-degree angle, right? DBs are starting to use it a little bit more to try to read quarterbacks, try to get their eyes in the backfield, to try to play the short routes first. But I'm just focused on like, okay, so I'm going to do a backpedal first. I'm working on my off coverage. I'm going to do backpedal first. Then I'm going to do a shuffle. And the only thing I want to do out of every break is drive as hard as I can. So shuffle, and I'm just driving. No balls coming at all. I just want to plant my foot in the ground and get out of there as quick as possible and make up ground. Okay, so these are other simple drills you can do. And this is the exact same drill, but now, you know, corner and post breaks. All right. So same thing, shuffle, turn. See, I move my flip-flops, move my cleats, and I'm just turning and breaking. All right. And again, on my left foot up here, shuffle first time. Second time I go through, I'll want to put my right foot up. You know, next time I go through, it'll be a back pedal, stuff like that. These are simple drills that you can do on your own and really get the most out of just making sure that you're driving, making sure that you're doing the correct thing by yourself. As soon as you get more people, it's easier to do reaction stuff. Just do these same drills with the point, do these same drills with the receiver breaking. It's a lot easier once you get more people, but by yourself, it's just focusing on that small, those little details that'll help you as soon as you get into that game or having somebody in there as a stimulus, like you said. And then I guess moving on from this is, so these next videos that I'm going to show you, this is working with people. So some of these guys are CFL guys, some of these guys are university guys, higher level university guys. And all I want to show you is, so now as soon as you get more people in, what you see us start to do is we start to use a lot more reaction type stuff, right? My favorite type of thing. Honestly, my favorite type of off-season training is probably getting out there and doing like a skelly or half line, because you're just going to get all of these drills encompassed into your skelly, into your half line, right? You can warm up with these type of drills. If you can get enough people, like you can't really get any better than that, because reps, experience, all that kind of stuff is going to come from skelly and half line, right? I don't know for you guys if you're doing much skelly or half line in a regular normal off season, or if it's just kind of right into season and practices right away. How does that look for you guys at Cambridge?
So it's been a little bit different depending on the year. Usually we can get out on the field. Like again, so many of our guys are multi-sport guys. There are programs that do stuff in the winter. We haven't. We've run like a skills camp like Sunday mornings if guys are interested before. But we don't have any like mandatory before tryout stuff. We'll do meetings, which we've actually, funnily enough, done online for several years because we have players that come from all over the place. And so it's just simpler to do them online. And now obviously that's probably standard operating procedure for everyone in the world. But we lucked into that. We had the GoToMeeting app already downloaded. But so for us, usually, you know, we're pretty heavy on like trying to keep the contact minimal like early on. So we do a fair amount of skelly. And then obviously train, like we don't have a ton of time preseason. Like you know, it's such a difference. Like you think of like a university training camp. You know, I remember planning out my first year as the head coach in Cambridge. We were allowed to get on the fields April 1st if it didn't snow. So if we didn't have snow, we could get on April 1st. And we played our first game the weekend before May 2-4. And so we had I think it was 7 weeks the way it worked out. Maybe it was the weekend after May 2-4, but I seem to remember the number of, we had 16 practices before our first game. And and so we had some time, but so we would do a little more Skelly early on, and then we use Skelly, like that's a built-in part of our practice. But I think for players right now, once we are allowed to get on the field, like what we're running this summer, and hopefully we're running this summer and soon, targeting the first weekend back after the July long weekend for us, is like running basically Skelly as the game that we're going to play. 'Cause can't play contact football for the skill guys, and everything building up to that. So it's definitely, I agree. Like I think a lot of players totally understand that they got to learn the plays, but they don't like link the techniques into the plays. Like I think that's one thing that is a big jump from like high school to our level to U Sports, obviously to the pros, is your techniques make up the scheme. It's not just you're the low player. It's like, okay, well, how are you the low player? Are you going to carry a vertical, inside leverage, outside leverage? Like where's your help? Like the degree of difficulty goes up substantially. So I think that's where being able to get, like, as soon as we can safely, transitioning from the, the drill phase of preparation to being able to do more Skelly will be huge for these guys.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing is, all these drills are great doing on your own, doing with reaction. All those are great, but if you don't translate them over to the game or to the Skelly or the practice, it's it's kind of a waste of time other than just conditioning, right? And that's the biggest thing is when you're doing these, that's why it's good to have a plan, because then at least once a practice comes up or a game comes up, that, okay, when I break to this receiver, I got to turn my head and get going. I got to drive like I did in my drill that I was driving into my flip flop. You know what I mean? I have to drive that hard to this receiver to try to make up ground, because that's why I did that drill. That's why I'm trying to get better at that, because once this happens in a game, it'll be easy, right?
Absolutely.
And the biggest thing too, and the whole reason I like this reaction type stuff is because in a game, when a receiver's running at you or when a running back's coming at you, you can't, it's hard to get your balance correct, right? So to work on having your, being able to backpedal or being able to shuffle out and being able to break now multiple ways from that backpedal or shuffle, instead of just going, okay, I'm going to this cone or I'm going to this cone. It's a completely different world. When I'm backpedaling, I know I'm breaking right to that cone, and then up from that cone, I'm going to break to another cone. It's easy to do that. As soon as you're backing up and you have to start reacting on whether it's, in a game, a running back or a receiver, right, or a quarterback's look, that's when you're going to really feel that balance on your feet, right? The biggest part of football is being balanced on both feet when you can, right? And being able to break one way or the other. So I think that's why, at least personally, I like doing most of these reaction type stuff. And again, I'm now what I'll do is I'll kind of open up some more drills just so that you guys can get ideas of when I talk about this reaction type stuff. But I'll go to a simple one here. So the simple breaks that I talk about, you can never do those enough, right? So the breaking down on a curl, breaking down, on an out, on an in. And then generally there's two ways I kind of look at it, right? At least as a DB, a linebacker is a little bit different because you're going to be square to the line of scrimmage more times than not, right? Very rarely, like unless it's man and you're covering downfield or the guy's running the corner. As a linebacker, you're going to open your hips all the way with the receiver, right? He's generally coming downhill and stuff. But for me personally, as a DB, I try to do as many backpedaling breaks as I do backpedal open and then break, right? So when I say open, I mean turn your hips like you're running with a fly, or like you're running with a corner, like you're running with a post, and then being able to come back downhill, right? And the balance I'm talking on your feet is when you do open your hips and turn, to be imbalanced enough as you're running to be able to put your foot in the ground and come back downhill on curl, whether it's, a check down, whether you're coming back down on a run, whatever it is. That's kind of the big thing I try to do in any sort of these open hip drills that I'm going to show you from here on out. So I'll show you this one. this is just a triple break. So I'm working off of a quarterback, and he's telling me when to break back downhill. But essentially, all I'm doing is I'm breaking downhill. When he tells me to backpedal, I'm going to turn and I'm going to open. Then I'll break back downhill, and then he's going to tell me to backpedal. I'll turn and open, and then I'll break, and it'll be easier to understand once I show you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this drill out with a side shuffle, just to get my feet warmed up, and then I have a quarterback I'm looking at. So I'm going to square hip break, and then you can see at this point we're working on opening the hips, and just to finish with a speed turn. You can finish at any drill at the end with either a speed turn or a zone turn, right? Looking back at the quarterback, breaking back downhill. The finish of the drill is just, get the ball in, or if I'm driving to that flip flop, whatever it is, whatever I decide, the finish of the drill. But the idea of this drill is I'm working on 3 breaks in one, essentially. So my first one is just going to be square back, breaking downhill. My next one, I'm going to open my hips, break back down. The next one after that is when I'm going to open my hips, and then I'm breaking 90 or 90, right? Again, the biggest thing is anytime you're working on an open hip type break, you want to really commit your hips like you're going vertical, whether it's a DB or a linebacker, right? Because what you'll see a lot is that anybody that's played the game before and had to cover somebody knows that if you turn your hips and you're only shuffling, that guy's just going to run right by you. So the biggest thing in any type of these drills is really to open those hips up. So commit your hips vertical, commit your hips vertical. And again, that's just another way to get to a more game-like situation, because very rarely are we breaking downhill from a perfectly square position, right? We're either as a linebacker opening up on a 45, as a DB having to turn and open, right? As some sort of deep zone player having to weave, and then break. So that's why it's really good to get outside of the simple drills that I was talking about and focus on, okay, what's going to happen in the game? Oh, I'm going to have to open kind of on a 45-degree angle this way and break downhill, open on a kind of 45-degree angle this way and break down. So that's the biggest thing, is you just have to start thinking about, what do I normally do in a game? And if you have game film, that's easy. Just start watching game film, go, oh, look at that. I had to open like this and then break. There's a drill that I can go do in my backyard, right? Oh, look, see how long it took me to break downhill on the screen or swing pass. Well, there's a drill I can work on. You know what I mean? It's just, drills are littered all over game film, and it's just about picking which ones you need and being able to go work on that, right? And I think that's kind of the biggest thing for especially younger players, because you can get lost in doing the same thing over and over again. But when you really look at it, all you have to do is go through any sort of game film, and you'll have all the drills you need right in front of you, and you can just go create what was difficult for you, right? And work what you were good at during the game. And I think that's kind of the easiest way to look at it, right?
Yeah, that's a great perspective. And I think, you bring up, like, especially with younger players, the same, you need to repeat the skills, but that doesn't mean you need to repeat the drill, right? And I think that's something I forget. I was at a coaching clinic, earlier on in my career, and I remember the guy saying that, and I think it was a quarterback coaching clinic, just talking about, changing up, the throwing angle, or changing up the way they rush to have a pass rusher, or, I think it was actually the guy was talking about, like, escaping pressure. And he just said, well, we would take our last 10 pressures, right? And we would literally simulate those last 10 pressures. It might be 3 or 4 double edge pressures. It might be, hey, the 3-tech lost right away, and on the guard lost right away, and the 3-tech got upfield, and we had to move to our left and throw. So when they were warming up, they would just build that into their warm-up. Their last 10 times they got rushed, they would replay those, all throughout the week. And then the next week, just to change it up, hey, how did we get pressure this week? What footwork could you use to get out of that situation? And I always thought that was a great point, especially for younger players. You want to make sure that you're still repeating the skills, right? Like you mentioned, the weave, man turn, zone turn, breaking off those different hip angles. But it doesn't mean you need to practice, zone turns with the same drill, for 27 practices
Right.
before you change it, right? It's just, I think, like anyone, even players in your situation that are, pros, you're going to get bored of doing the same drill 27 times.
Yeah. And realistically, it's not that, pros are doing anything much different than younger players. It's just pros are able to focus it into a game a little bit more because, well, we've done it more. So it's easier for us to be able to figure out what we need to work on in the off season. I think, again, you kind of, you nailed it right on the head, is that these quarterbacks were doing it in their warm up, right? A lot of these drills, especially the simpler ones, they don't need to be at full speed. Yeah, you can ramp it up to full speed, but ultimately to do anything well, I always tell everybody I'm training, okay, let's start this half speed, because if you're doing the drill or you're doing the break or you're doing the plant incorrectly, then if you just ramp it up to full speed, you're going to be doing it incorrectly at full speed, right? So you really need to focus on it. And that's one of my, when I talk about planning out my weeks, is my week is usually, and this is just my running, is some sort of sport, whether it's, basketball, whether it's whatever we can figure out, right, with my friends that I'm around. And then it's simple breaks, usually on my own, usually with one other person. And then it'll be some sort of competition stuff, a skelly, a half line with quarterbacks involved, with receivers involved. And then it'll be just a regular sprint type thing. So it could be, it could be anything like track speed. It could be anything like agility speed. But the biggest thing is you always want to tie in those simple breaks. And if you have to go as slow as possible, go as slow as possible to make them, sharp before you speed it up, right? And if that's in warm up, then do it in warm up. And it's a great way to just keep your footwork clean, but then being able to get into whether it's a practice, warm up for practice, whether it's a warm up for skelly, whatever it could be, right? And I think that's, one of the most important things. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just agreeing. I think it helps keep players interested, and ultimately the more engaged you are in what you're doing, and the more you have an idea of, hey, what's the plan today? Like, what am I trying to get out of today? The more effective you're going to be. So, yeah, I just totally agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess for the purposes, I'll just show you guys a few more drills that we kind of worked on. I'll explain them as we're going through, but now at this point, it's kind of just getting different ideas. And the reason why I'm doing these specific drills, just giving yourself some more ideas for whether you're getting into running now in the off season, whatever it could be. So right here, what we're working on here, and that's me going first, but I'll show you with, this is Scott Hutter from Laurier. He's at Edmonton now. So what we're focusing on is, remember how I said we're going to focus on either one aspect or the other. So we're all DBs here. And what we're working on right now is press. Okay, so you can see we have two different cones. What it's going to be is it's going to be a reaction off this quarterback. Okay, so he's either going to press, it's going to be like a receiver releasing inside or releasing outside. So all we're going to do is shuffle off the reaction. We'll open up, and then the quarterback has a reaction break, a 90-degree break. So he's either going to break on the in or break on the out. Okay, so you'll see here, it's going to shuffle, open, and then 90-degree break. Okay, and the biggest thing to do with these type of drills is you want to switch up, because you don't want to get into a rhythm of being able to know when somebody's going to break. So you want to be able to switch up timing, whether it's, making them run a little bit deeper, waiting on the break, making it happen a little bit faster, right? But you have to be working with somebody that's willing to be doing that and, kind of wanting to get that work in. But again, we're working on press here, shuffle, stand in front of the man, and then what we're going to do is open. So we're treating as in that receiver made that release. And then now we're only going to cover a 90-degree break. And you can see Scott here at the end of this drill. The big thing for any defensive player, and this is one of my main points for any younger defensive player, because generally what happens is when you are in high school and you're one of the better players in high school or one of the better players in city football, the easy thing to do, or you're one of the faster players, the easy thing to do is just stare at the quarterback the entire time, because you can make up ground all over the place. You can make plays just staring back at the quarterback while he's throwing. What ends up happening is if you meet somebody at the same level as you, it becomes a little bit harder. So the biggest key that I tell everybody as they're breaking is get your eyes to where you're going for at least 2 steps. At least 2 steps until you catch up, right? It's the getting in phase part where you're able to at least touch them, and then you look back. And you'll see Scott at the end of this, he does it. So he breaks, and you can see his head. He has like a little head turn right to the sideline. Now I'd like to see him look a little bit longer, but that right there is what ultimately will catch you up to that receiver, will catch you up when you're in that zone breaking on, if you're a linebacker as a will and you're breaking on the hook or something like that. Getting that head around to that receiver is going to give you that extra 2 steps. All right.
Yeah, and like you said, that's I feel like that's my main point every summer. We've got guys, and generally you're playing summer football because you're one of the better players around, and most of our guys have at least an opportunity to, if they make the right decisions as a senior varsity player, have a chance to get recruited. And that's the biggest thing I tell guys is, look, you can you didn't do it right there, and you got to pick because you're playing high school and you're one of the dominant players. Even if you're a great player who's going to go on to play in the CFL, once you move, to the university level, everyone is really good. So the 2 steps that you didn't need today, you're going to need later. So start taking them now so that it becomes a habit. I think that's a great, if you're a JV DB or any cover player watching this, if you just take that one piece into your game, it makes a world of difference.
Yeah, and I've always said it, every level that you move up is always the best players of that level before. So when you're in, JV, and if you're one of the best players, well, guess what? When you get to senior, well, now you're playing all those best players that are now on the other team, right? So you're going to need that extra step. And then when you move up again, you're going to need another step. And then once you get up to the pros, wherever it is, CFL, NFL, well, you'll probably need a few more steps. So that's why the biggest thing is now is, especially in the drills, and I get it in the game, sometimes things happen, you know what I mean? And it's hard to focus in, but when you do it in the drills, when you do it in the off season and you're focused on it, that's why having a plan is great, because when you're focused on it, then as soon as you get to a game, it's just going to be habit, right? 21 to 30 days to make or break a habit. So if you're working on the off season, you got a head start once you hit the season, right? And I don't know how much time you got left, but I'll give a couple small little drills for
a couple more is great. Like a couple more is great. Don't worry about time too much. If we're a little short, that's fine. If we're a little long, that's fine too.
All righty. So right here, again, same day. This is Scott. So what we're going to be working on here is we're going to work on a little bit of off coverage. So exact same drill we were working on with the press. But now all we're doing is we're starting doing a backing up. Okay, so now what we're going to do is he's going to back pedal. All right, and again, to back pedal, the shuffle, that'll be, whatever, at least for me, you do whatever you're comfortable with. Some coaches will want you to do a specific way, but you might as well work on both the techniques anyway. But you'll see we'll open up a hip, and the only difference on this one is now we're breaking downhill. So instead of the 90-degree break, we're going to break downhill. So Scott, you can see he's got his eyes on me. We're going to just get into our open hip. So we've already predetermined he's going to go over his right shoulder. And now all he's doing is as soon as that quarterback makes a look one way or the other, he's going to break downhill. So you can see Scott here. Again, same thing I'm telling everybody. And you can see, so Scott's in the CFL. He's in his second year in the CFL hopefully when it goes this year. But even Scott has to work on getting his eyes to that receiver, right? And you can see he is working on it, but ultimately make this a very good rep is he should be driving hard to this receiver, right? You'll see it peaks and then gets a look back. But again, the longer you can get your eyes on that receiver and make up ground, the better. But ultimately, working from open hip, breaking downhill, pretty good finish. All right, and then this is one of actually, I'll go to this one first. So this is ramping it up a little bit. So everything you've seen so far is off of reaction, right? Now this is when we're going to be working on a partner. So again, the exact same drill. And like we said, you can do the same type of footworks, just different ways in different drills, just masked differently, right? So we can see here is we're going to be working on the exact same thing, but now we're just working on it with a receiver. All right, I messed up the loading. So now take him back to that press drill. right? We're going to open up our hips. We're going to stay in front of them, open up our hips. And ultimately, you can see in this where I froze it here is Scott has his hips open and his eyes are down on my hips. And now the same drill applies. Just the same thing we were doing with the quarterback, where he's going to break 90 in or he's going to break 90 out on an in or an out. But now the receiver is going to run this for him. So what you can see is at this point, as a receiver, I have one way or the other way to go. And all Scott's going to be doing is reacting off this. All right. So you can see here, because we're in a man situation, this is why we're man turning. This is why we're man turning, speed turning around on this. But you can see Scotty gets himself into an open position, breaks off my reaction. And again, you don't need a ton from the guy that's showing you a rep. All he needs to do is give you that quick reaction and you can finish the drill. Scott has his eyes in a good place right on my hips, right? Breaks, opens, finishes the drill. So again, what I've been showing you is ultimately the same drill over and over and over again. Just now it's, by yourself, and then it's with somebody holding the ball, and then it's with a receiver breaking, right? And again, what you can see is as we move on and as you get used to this, the one with the receiver, when it's this close, is going to be the sloppiest, right? Because you're reacting off receiver, it's happening very fast. But if we keep working on it in those simpler drills, right, then we know what the footwork should be by the time we get up to the receiver. And then ultimately, this will be the hardest one to get used to. And then the harder one out of this is once you're in the game, right? But if we're working on those simple steps for the beginning, as we move up, it's going to be easier and easier and easier, right, to be able to make these type of plays. All right. One more, and this is a good one for linebackers. I've been talking a lot about DBs, so linebackers wake up here. This is perfect for any sort of zone where we're looking at the quarterback, we're on his break, and it's getting your eyes around to, perfect spot for a linebacker. Let's say we're talking with, a Will, and you have a check down over the ball and a hook by number 2 weak, right? And we're in some version of cut, and it's being able to break from one to the other. All right, we're going to get back to our landmark, back to where we got to go, and then we're on the quarterback's shoulders and on his eyes. And what we can see here is we have the quarterback. He has a two-way go. So you can see when the drill sets up, we have both our players right on the cones, right? And the quarterback has a two-way go. He can look to the left. He can look to the right. The idea of the two guys out on the cones is as soon as that quarterback takes that look, we got to turn our heads. One guy turns into the receiver. The other guy turns into the defender. And that defender has to drive to that receiver as fast as he can. Right? So this is a simple zone drill that you can get in with reaction. You can get it if you put another person on the other side and we're predetermining where we're going. But this is a simple one. So you see the quarterback open and we're driving. Obviously, we're throwing to the DB here anyway. But you can see this is Malcolm Thompson from Laurier. And he does a very good job at as soon as our quarterback turns his shoulders, you can see his head snap right away. Boom. Because he knows he has to make up ground. And this is the key thing. You can turn your head, get your eyes to where you're going, but if we're in a good spot, we can look back and make a play on that ball. So this is just getting used to that for a drill version of it. All right, and then finally a fun one for me that I do with a lot of the guys, just kind of more of a conditioning drill. And again, going back to that balance in your back pedal or in your shuffle, this is a really good reaction break one and ultimately a fun one at the end of it. So what we're doing is, you'll see I'm going to back pedal throughout this entire thing, and all I'm doing is breaking on these cones. Wherever this coach is going to throw the cones, I'm breaking downhill, getting to that cone, and then starting in my back pedal again. All right, we'll try it again. And this is good for just getting reaction, keeping balance as you're backpedaling. Again, I don't like it because we know we're breaking downhill every time. I would prefer reaction in terms of having to go one way or the other, because I can kind of cheat it and go very slow backwards, right? But again, this is really good for getting your footwork correct, right? Being able to back up, keep that weight over top of your toes so that as soon as that cone goes down, we're breaking forward, right? And ultimately, those are just some ideas for you to kind of take into the off season, and once you start running again, to be able to put these into your practice plan. And again, just have a plan when you go out. Make sure that you know what you're planning on doing. You know what you need to work on, and then again, you can do the same thing, just looking a little bit different, adding in different reactions, adding in different stimulus, just like you said.
Yeah, that's great stuff. And for me, not obviously playing defensive back or playing a coverage position, but playing offensive line. So many of the movement stuff, and you talk about, there's the fundamental skill of like a zone turn and man turn, and then there's the ability to apply that skill based on a stimulus. And for me, that really resonates. And I imagine it resonates with any position on a football field, but as an offensive lineman, it's so similar, right? Where yes, you're working the footwork of a pass set, but you're doing that based on the angle and the approach of the rusher, right? Or vice versa, the defensive lineman, you're working a hand reaction, but it's based on the angle of the offensive tackle or when the offensive tackle throws their hands. And so I think that's something for players to consider, as you're getting out and trying to do your own thing before, we're able to get out there together. And then when we all are ultimately out there, able to get out there together, there's definitely some drills in there that we'll be stealing with the Lions program and putting to good use. So I'll have to send you any clips if we get any good picks in our Skelly stuff this summer off any of that footwork. I'll be sure to credit the drills back to you. So thanks so much for doing this, and thanks to everybody who's watching. As per usual, if you haven't yet, and usually by the time we get to the end of these videos, anyone who's still watching, I'm sure is already subscribed. But if you could help us out, it'd be great. And throw a like on the video if you haven't yet. It just helps more people find it. I'm going to take this because we've just recorded like 2 hours here. So I'm going to take this and break it down and edit it. And we'll leave this up on YouTube, but there'll be an episode as well, just with what Coach Daly put out. So if you're interested in watching it again and you want to get another look at those drills in the next couple of days, I should have that out and edited. So, thanks, Mike, for doing this. A big fan of your stuff on social media, and I'll make sure to tag you guys in when we get those out. And like I said, if you're, looking for some really high quality, development, whether you're just looking at the drills on social media, or if you want to get in contact with Coach through there as well, I'm sure, there's lots of opportunity to get better before the season starts. And I know some of those, Malcolm Thompson and Scott Hutter, I spent the last 5 years, or I guess not, Scott's been gone for a year now, but, seeing those guys make plays. Malcolm might be 6. Some high quality guys. Yeah, I was at Laurier for the last 6 years coaching offense, but so I didn't have any of those guys on the scout team for too long. They were both giving my offensive scout team a hard time pretty early on. But good story I always tell with Scott Hutter and Phil, who was on here before, was talking about how effort matters in recruiting. Scott is a terrific athlete and was going to get recruited, was getting recruited to a number of schools out of Lucas in London, great player. I think every school wanted him. I had to drag Scott off of the scout team in his 4th year. So he's in his draft year. He's been a 3-year starter. We were a guy short, and I'm looking for the freshman that's supposed to be on the scout punt team. And someone goes, no, you have 12. And I turn around and Scott Hutter's playing field tackle. I'm like, don't snap that ball, because if Scott Hutter gets hurt playing scout team tackle on punt, I'm gonna get fired real quick. So there's a lot of high caliber guys that putting in work there, and Mal's an incredible story in his own right with I think 3 ACL tears. I've been around a lot of really good football players. That might be the most electric dude I've ever seen play. And we'd have some other guys, Godfrey Onyeka, who's a fellow CFLer now, famously said that Godfrey was a 3-time All-Canadian at boundary corner, and he wasn't even the best DB in the boundary at Laurier. He
was something special.
Guys, it's a special opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. He was something special. And I mean, the biggest thing about all those guys that you just mentioned, right? Godfrey, Malcolm, Scott, is it's a perfect example of, like you said, with Scott being out there on scout team, is, you're only going to make it as far as you enjoy the game, right? And, my thing is I'll stop playing once I don't enjoy practice anymore, because games, it's easy to enjoy, right? Those are the easy ones. Once I stop enjoying practice, that's when I'll stop playing. But all those guys that you just mentioned right there, you can tell that even with these drills and, off-season workouts, they enjoy the heck out of it. And I think that's kind of what made them get where they are. You know what I mean? A couple of them are pretty special athletes too, but I mean, it definitely helps when you enjoy what you're doing and enjoy the work that you're putting in.
Absolutely. And you know, players are just going to continue to benefit. It's been great to see. The one positive I think out of COVID is, you know, there's been so many social media platforms come up because people are trying to solve the same problems, right? How do we all get better in this situation we're in when we can't go do skelly like we normally would, or we can't, you know, even go to the gym like we normally would. You know, and your accounts is one of the ones that I stumbled on that, you know, I every time you post something new, I'm checking it out and seeing how we can use it. So thanks again. I'm going to take us off the live here because I didn't see any more questions. Most of the questions that came up, you know, kind of got answered as we went through, which is great. So I'm going to take us off the live, but just want to say thanks again. And we'll be back next Tuesday night. We're working on, we got a couple guests. We're going to be doing 2 a night now for the foreseeable future because we want to try and get over 4,000 watch hours, which we're like 100 watch hours away from. So
Wow.
if anyone wants to leave it running while they're at work, we won't